I stood outside my daughter's partially open bedroom door, clutching legal documents worth $3.7 million. I had come to share the news about her late grandmother's inheritance. Instead, I heard my daughter Jessica laughing with her husband Derek, mocking my outdated clothes, my simple lifestyle, and calling me an embarrassment at family gatherings. She complained about having to visit me in my modest home, saying she wished I would just disappear so she wouldn't have to pretend to care anymore. My hand trembled on the doorknob as my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The foundation of everything I am rests on one simple truth. I loved my daughter more than life itself. Raising Jessica alone after my wife Caroline died from cancer when Jessica was only 8 years old became my entire world. I worked double shifts at Henderson's auto repair shop, my hands black with grease, my back aching from bending over engine blocks for 12 hours straight. Every extra dollar went toward giving Jessica the childhood her mother and I had dreamed of providing together. I remember teaching her to ride a bike on Maple Street, running beside her with my hand steadying the seat, my heart swelling with pride when she finally pedaled on her own. Those summer evenings felt magical. I remember sitting at our small kitchen table until midnight, helping her with algebra homework. I barely understood myself, determined she would have opportunities I never had. I attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, even when exhaustion made my bones feel like lead. When Jessica graduated high school with honors, I cried harder than I had since Caroline's funeral. She got accepted to Riverside University, a private school with tuition that made my head spin. $43,000 a year. I took out loans, picked up weekend shifts, and watched my savings disappear. But seeing her walk across that stage 4 years later in her cap and gown made every sacrifice worth it. 3 years ago, I gave her a wedding that cost every penny I had saved, $32,000 for a single day. The venue overlooking the lake, the flowers she loved, the band she wanted, the dress that made her look like a princess. I walked her down the aisle with tears streaming down my face, remembering the tiny infant I had held in the hospital, the little girl who called me her hero, the young woman who hugged me that day and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Daddy. You're the best father anyone could ask for." Derek seemed nice enough then, successful, polite, well-dressed. He worked in finance, drove a luxury car, and clearly adored Jessica. I thought she had found her happiness. I thought I had done my job well, but over the past year, something changed. Jessica started canceling our Sunday dinners, the tradition we had maintained since she was 12. She made excuses about work deadlines, business trips, Derek's family obligations. When she did visit, she seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly, eager to leave. I told myself she was busy building her career as a marketing executive, adjusting to married life. I convinced myself it was normal for adult children to drift away from their parents. The loneliness in my 3-bedroom house became overwhelming. I ate dinner alone, staring at old photographs on the walls, Caroline smiling in her garden, Jessica blowing out candles on her 10th birthday, the 3 of us at the Grand Canyon, the last vacation we took before Caroline got sick. Some nights, the silence felt so heavy I could barely breathe. 6 months ago, my mother passed away at 91. She had lived a full life, sharp and independent until the very end. I was her only child, and Jessica was her only grandchild. The estate took months to settle, tangled in legal procedures and paperwork that made my head hurt. I met with attorneys, signed documents, waited for courts to process everything. Then, last Tuesday, I received the final paperwork. My mother had accumulated quite a fortune through careful saving, smart investments, and the sale of her home in a neighborhood that had appreciated significantly over the decades. The total estate value, $3.7 million. My hands shook as I read the distribution terms. Half to me, $1.8 million. Half to Jessica, $1.9 million. I spent days imagining Jessica's reaction, her joy, her relief, her gratitude for her grandmother's generosity. I pictured us crying together, remembering the woman who had baked us cookies every Sunday, who had slipped Jessica $20 bills for something special, who had attended every graduation and milestone despite her advancing age. I planned the moment carefully. I would drive to Jessica's house in my old Ford pickup, the one I had owned for 17 years, the one that still ran perfectly despite 214,000 miles on it. I would surprise her, see her face light up, share this incredible blessing together. So that Thursday afternoon, I made the 40-minute drive to her suburban neighborhood, where houses cost $600,000 and everyone drove vehicles newer than mine. I pulled into her driveway, clutching the manila folder with all the documents. My heart pounded with anticipation. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I heard voices upstairs, muffled but definitely there. I tried the door. Unlocked. I stepped inside, calling out, "Jessica, honey, it's Dad." Still no response, just the continued murmur of conversation from the second floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees protesting slightly. The voices grew clearer. Jessica's bedroom door stood partially open, maybe 6 inches. I reached for the handle, ready to push it open and announce myself. That's when I heard Derek's voice, loud and clear. "Your dad is absolutely pathetic, Jess. I mean, did you see what he wore to dinner last month? Those work boots with khakis? When is he going to realize we're only tolerating him out of obligation?" I froze. My hand stopped inches from the door. Jessica's laugh cut through me like broken glass. "Oh my God, I know. I can't wait until he's just gone, you know? Then we won't have to deal with his embarrassing self anymore. No more pretending to care about his boring stories about fixing cars or whatever." The document slipped slightly in my suddenly sweaty grip. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process what I was hearing from my daughter's mouth. Every word felt like a physical blow. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, hidden from view but close enough to hear every syllable of their conversation. Part of me wanted to burst through that door, to confront them, to demand an explanation. But another part, the part that had raised Jessica and thought I knew her heart, needed to hear more, needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. Derek continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Remember your wedding?" He gave that embarrassing toast in his rental tux that didn't even fit right. "My colleagues were there, Jess. I had to apologize for him afterward." "The tux was fine," Jessica said, and for a moment my heart lifted, thinking she might defend me. Then she added, "But yeah, his toast was pretty cringeworthy. All that stuff about my mom and their little love story. My friends were texting me jokes about it for weeks. Caroline. They were mocking the memory of Caroline." Jessica's voice took on a mocking tone, imitating me. "My little girl, my pride and joy. Back when she was 8, we used to." She broke off, laughing, like, "Okay, Dad, we get it. You raised me. Do you want a medal?" The man worked in a garage his whole life, Derek said, and I could hear him moving around the room. What does he know about real success? Real culture? I tried talking to him about the markets last time, and he just stared at me like I was speaking Chinese. "Because he was," Jessica said. "Dad barely finished high school. Has not stupid, but has definitely not sophisticated. Do you know he still uses a flip phone in 2024? It's mortifying." I looked down at the phone clipped to my belt, the same one I had owned for 6 years. It made calls. It sent text messages. What else did I need? And his house. Derek groaned. That tiny place with the linoleum floors and the furniture from the 1980s. How did you grow up there without losing your mind? "It wasn't always bad," Jessica said, her voice softening slightly. Then she laughed again, harder. "Actually, no, it kind of was. But I didn't know any better. I thought everyone lived like that. Then I got to college and saw how normal people lived, and I was like, oh no, normal people. I wasn't normal people." Derek said something I couldn't quite hear. Then Jessica responded clearly. "The worst part is he still thinks we're close. He calls every week wanting to chat." "About what?" "I don't care about Mrs. Patterson's hip surgery or how his tomatoes are growing. I have an actual life." "Speaking of actual life," Derek said, "did you see the bonus projection for next quarter? If the Hendricks deal closes, we're looking at an extra 47,000, which brings us to 78,000 for the year." Jessica said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. The same excitement she used to have when I brought her ice cream after a hard day at school. Europe is definitely happening. 3 weeks in Italy, then a week in Paris. 14,000. Total, Derek said. Your dad probably thinks that's a fortune. He does, Jessica said flatly. Remember when he gave me that savings bond for my 21st birthday? $500. Like that was some huge gift. I smiled and hugged him, and then laughed about it with my roommates for an hour. The savings bond. I had started it the day she was born, adding money every month for 21 years. $500 was everything I could manage. I remembered her hug, her tears, her words. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone's ever given me. All lies. At least we don't have to worry about supporting him when he gets old, Derek said, and my blood went cold. We already talked about that, right? Cheapest nursing home we can find. He won't know the difference anyway. County home on 5th Street takes Medicaid, Jessica said casually, as if discussing where to buy groceries. I looked into it last month. The reviews are terrible, but whatever. It's not like we're going to visit much anyway. I had visited nursing homes before, researching options for my mother before she insisted on staying independent until the end. I knew County Home on 5th Street. I had walked through its dingy hallways, smelled the urine and disinfectant, seen the blank faces of forgotten elderly people parked in wheelchairs along the walls. The place where people went to die slowly, alone, unmourned. That's where my daughter planned to send me. Thank God we have our own money, Derek continued. Can you imagine if we actually needed something from him? What could he possibly provide? Exactly, Jessica said. He has nothing we need, nothing we want. Has just there, taking up space in our lives, expecting us to care. The documents in my hands suddenly felt immeasurably heavy. I looked down at them, seeing Jessica's name typed neatly on the inheritance distribution form. $1,900,000. A fortune. A life-changing amount of money for someone who thought I had nothing to offer. Someone who was counting down the days until I was gone. Someone who had just called me pathetic, embarrassing, unsophisticated, and expendable. I remembered every sacrifice, every missed meal so she could eat, every threadbare shirt I wore so she could have new school clothes, every lonely night after Caroline died when I cried in the garage so Jessica wouldn't hear, every penny I scraped together for her education, her wedding, her happiness, and this is what she had become. My chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing my heart with both hands. My eyes burned, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not where they might hear me. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. Instead, I learned I had lost my daughter long before today. The Jessica I loved, the little girl who held my hand and called me her hero, was gone. In her place was a stranger who despised everything I was and everything I had done. The question that haunted me as I drove wasn't whether to give her the money. It was whether the daughter I loved had ever really existed at all, or if I had been blind to who she truly was all along. I spent the next 3 days in a fog. I went through the motions of living, fixing Mrs. Patterson's Buick at the shop, watering my tomato plants, heating up canned soup for dinner. But inside, I felt hollowed out, like someone had taken a spoon and scraped away everything that made me who I was. The inheritance papers sat on my kitchen table, untouched. Every time I walked past them, I saw Jessica's name and heard her voice saying she couldn't wait until I was gone. On the 3rd night, I finally picked up the papers and read them thoroughly. Really read them. Not just the distribution amounts, but every clause, every footnote, every piece of legal language. That's when I saw it. Section 7, Paragraph 3. In the event that the executor determines circumstances have materially changed, such that the original distribution would not align with the decedent's wishes and values, the executor maintains full discretionary authority to reallocate the estate assets. I read it 4 times to make sure I understood. My mother, careful and thorough as always, had included a safety valve, and I was the executor. I thought about my mother then, really thought about her. She had been a school teacher for 40 years, touching hundreds of lives, known for her integrity and her firm belief that character mattered more than anything else. She had worried about Jessica over the past few years, mentioning more than once that success seemed to be changing her granddaughter. "Make sure she remembers what matters, Ben," she had said in the hospital, 2 weeks before she passed. "Money is a test, not a blessing, if it goes to someone who isn't ready." At the time, I had assured her Jessica was fine. Jessica was strong, grounded, grateful. I had been so wrong. The next morning, I called Margaret Sullivan, the estate attorney who had been handling my mother's affairs for 3 decades. Margaret was 72, sharp as a razor, with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Ben," she said warmly when I arrived at her office, "I was expecting you to come by to finalize the distributions. Do you have the signed documents?" "Not yet," I said, sitting across from her desk. "I need to talk to you about Section 7, Paragraph 3. Her eyebrows rose slightly. "The discretionary reallocation clause." "Yes. How does that work exactly?" Margaret folded her hands on her desk. "Your mother was very specific when we drafted her will. She loved Jessica deeply, but she was worried about the effect of sudden wealth on someone who hadn't been tested by hardship. She wanted you to have the authority to make a judgment call if you felt Jessica wasn't ready to receive such a large sum. What constitutes not ready? That's entirely up to you as executor. Lack of character, poor financial judgment, evidence that the money would do more harm than good. Your mother trusted your judgment completely. Whatever you decide, the courts will honor it as long as you can provide a reasonable justification." I stared at the framed law degree on her wall, thinking, what's the timeline? The final distributions need to be filed within 6 weeks. Until then, the estate remains in probate, and you have full control over allocation decisions. 6 weeks. I had 6 weeks to decide whether to give my daughter nearly $2 million or to... What? What was the alternative? "Can I ask what's prompting these questions?" Margaret said gently. I told her everything. The visit to Jessica's house, the conversation I overheard, every painful word. By the end, Margaret's expression had gone from sympathetic to genuinely sad. "Oh, Ben, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do," I admitted. Part of me wants to give her nothing, to let her face the consequences of who she's become. But another part remembers the little girl I raised, and I wonder if, in being vindictive... "You're not a vindictive man," Margaret said firmly. "But you are a father who's been deeply hurt. May I make a suggestion? Please, don't make any permanent decisions while you're in pain. But do test her. See if what you heard was truly who she is, or if it was just a terrible moment. Give her an opportunity to show you something real." I drove home thinking about Margaret's advice, a test, a way to see if my daughter had any genuine love left for me, separate from what I could provide her financially. That evening, I called Jessica. It went to voicemail. "Hi, honey. It's Dad. I need to talk to you about something important. Something regarding my health. Call me back when you get a chance." I waited. 1 day passed, then 2, then 3. On the 4th day, my phone finally rang. Jessica's name on the caller ID. "Hey, Dad," she said, and I could hear traffic in the background. She was calling from her car. "Sorry, I've been swamped with work." "What's up?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What's wrong with your health?" Just, "What's up?" As if I had called about nothing important. "I had some concerning test results from my doctor," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Some irregularities that need follow-up. I was hoping you might be able to visit soon so we could talk about it." Silence, then a long sigh. "Dad, I'm really buried right now. We have the Hendricks presentation next week, and I'm working 60-hour weeks. Can it wait a few weeks? Maybe a month?" Her father tells her he has concerning health test results, and she asks if it can wait a month. "Sure," I said quietly. "It can wait." "Great. Thanks for understanding. I really have to prep for a meeting. Love you, bye." She hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, that hollow feeling in my chest, expanding until it felt like it might swallow me whole. But I wasn't done testing. 2 days later, I called again. This time I made up a story about my truck breaking down and needing a ride to a doctor's appointment. Jessica reluctantly agreed, but only after I specifically said it was serious and I had no other options. She showed up 90 minutes late, not to my door, but honking from the driveway like I was supposed to run out to meet her. I walked slowly to her silver BMW, climbed into the passenger seat. "Sorry, I'm late," she said, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was insane. Traffic on a Tuesday at 2 in the afternoon, in a town of 37,000 people. Right. She immediately got on her phone as she drove, typing messages at red lights, barely glancing at the road. I watched her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and felt nothing but sadness. "How have you been?" I asked. "Fine. Busy. How's Derek?" "Good. How's work?" "Fine, Dad. Just fine." One-word answers. Not a single question about me, my health, my life. I tried again. "I've been feeling lonely lately," I said, testing for any spark of empathy. "The house is so quiet now. I miss our Sunday dinners." She didn't respond, just kept scrolling through her phone. At a red light, I tried once more. "Jessica, do you remember when you were 10 and you broke your arm falling from the treehouse?" She barely looked up. "Yeah. So, I stayed with you in the hospital for 3 whole days. Slept in that awful chair by your bed because you were scared and didn't want me to leave. You held my hand all night." Jessica's thumb kept scrolling. "Dad, why are you being so weird and sentimental right now? I have a conference call in 20 minutes that I need to prep for." We arrived at the medical building downtown. I had told her I had an appointment, which was technically true, just not a medical one. Margaret's law office occupied the 3rd floor of this building. "I'll wait here," Jessica said, not even offering to come inside, not asking if I needed help or support. "I might be a while," I said. 45 minutes, maybe." She sighed heavily. "Fine, I'll make some calls." I went inside and took the elevator to Margaret's office. We spent the time finalizing a plan, a way to handle the inheritance that would honor my mother's wishes while also giving Jessica one final chance to prove she was capable of change. When I returned to the car 45 minutes later, Jessica looked furious. 45 minutes, Dad? Really? I've been sitting here this whole time. I missed my call." "No. How did it go?" "No. Is everything okay?" Just anger about her inconvenience. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. Then I said quietly, "Your grandmother left you something, a substantial inheritance." The change was instant and dramatic. Jessica's head whipped toward me, her eyes suddenly bright, alert, focused. "What? Grandma? She left me something." "Yes. How much?" The question came out immediately, before any expression of grief for her grandmother, before any emotion about the woman who had loved her unconditionally. I watched her carefully. "It's substantial. I'll explain everything this Sunday. Come to the house for dinner. Bring Derek. 6 o'clock. Her entire demeanor transformed. Her voice went soft, warm, affectionate in a way it hadn't been in years. "Of course, Daddy. Of course we'll be there. Is there anything you need? Can I bring anything? Do you need help with dinner? Daddy." She called me Daddy. The word felt poisonous coming from her mouth now. "Just bring yourselves," I said. She reached over and patted my hand, something she hadn't done since her wedding day. "I love you so much, Dad. You know that, right? I'm sorry I've been so busy lately. I've really missed spending time with you." Every word was a lie, and we both knew it. But she didn't know that I knew. That evening, after she dropped me off, I received a text message from Jessica, a long one, full of heart emojis and affectionate words. "I've been thinking about family a lot lately, Daddy. You sacrifice so much for me, and I don't tell you enough how much I appreciate everything you've done. You're the best father anyone could ask for, and I'm so lucky to have you. Can't wait for Sunday. Love you more than words can say." I took a screenshot of the message and saved it in a folder on my computer. Then I sat at my kitchen table with the inheritance documents and made my final decisions about what would happen on Sunday. My daughter had failed every test. She had shown me exactly who she was. Someone who felt nothing for me except obligation and contempt. Someone whose affection could be purchased but not earned. Someone who saw me as an embarrassment at best and a burden at worst. I had raised her better than this. Caroline and I had modeled love, sacrifice, integrity. Somewhere along the way, Jessica had chosen a different path, and I couldn't save her from herself, but I could give her one last chance to understand what she had become and what she had lost. And I could honor my mother's final wish, to make sure the money went to someone who was ready to receive it with grace and character. Sunday would reveal everything. And after Sunday, Jessica would finally understand that love was not something you could take for granted, and that actions had consequences no matter how much money was at stake. Sunday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. I spent the morning cooking Caroline's pot roast, the recipe she had perfected over years of Sunday dinners. I hadn't made it since she died, couldn't bear to, but today felt appropriate for resurrection. Beef, carrots, potatoes, onions, slow-cooked for 5 hours until the meat fell apart at the touch of a fork. The smell filled my house with memories. I set the dining table with my mother's china, the delicate plates with tiny blue flowers around the rim. She had given them to Caroline and me as a wedding gift 43 years ago. I placed cloth napkins at each setting, filled the water glasses, put out the good silverware. In my study, I arranged the documents exactly as I needed them. The original estate distribution plan, the modified version Margaret and I had prepared, several other papers that would be necessary for what was coming. I placed them all in a leather folder on my desk where I could retrieve them at the right moment. At 5:45, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I watched Jessica and Derek emerge from her BMW. She wore an expensive dress, navy blue with some kind of designer label I probably couldn't pronounce. Derek had on a suit that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. They both carried items. Jessica held a bouquet of flowers. Derek had 2 bottles of wine. Gifts. They were bringing gifts. I opened the door before they could knock. Jessica's smile was radiant, perfectly practiced. She rushed forward and hugged me, tightly, for longer than necessary. "Daddy," she said, her voice warm and sweet. "It's so good to see you. I've missed you so much." Derek shook my hand with a firm grip, smiling broadly. "Ben, good to see you, sir. Thanks for having us over. Something smells incredible in there, sir." He had never called me sir before. They followed me inside, and Jessica immediately started complimenting everything. The house looked wonderful. Had I done something different with the living room? The flowers in the garden were beautiful. When had I become such a good gardener? I had been gardening for 30 years. She had never noticed before. We moved to the dining room, and I served the pot roast. Jessica took her first bite and made an exaggerated sound of pleasure. "Oh my God, Dad. This is amazing. Is this Mom's recipe?" "It is. I haven't had this in forever. Why don't you make it more often?" "Because it hurt too much. Because every time I thought about making it, I remembered Caroline standing at the stove, humming while she cooked, calling you to set the table. Because some things are too painful to resurrect until absolutely necessary." But I didn't say any of that. I just smiled and said, "Special occasions." Throughout dinner, Jessica performed beautifully. She asked about my life, my health, my friends, at the shop. She told stories about missing our time together, how she regretted letting work consume her life. Derek chimed in, talking about the importance of family, how they had been discussing making more time for the people who mattered. I played along, responding warmly, serving them seconds, acting as if I believed every word. Let them think they were succeeding. Let them believe their performance was convincing. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I offered coffee. Jessica accepted eagerly, sitting on the couch beside Derek, both of them leaning forward slightly, alert, expectant. The inheritance hung in the air between us, unspoken but present in every gesture. Finally, Jessica couldn't contain herself any longer. So, Dad, you mentioned Grandma's inheritance. I nodded slowly, setting my coffee cup down. Yes, let me get the documents. I'll be right back. I walked to my study, my heart pounding but my mind clear. I picked up the leather folder, checking its contents one final time. Everything was there. Everything I needed to show my daughter who I really was and what her choices had cost her. I also grabbed something else from my desk drawer, my phone, with the recording I had made outside their bedroom door 3 weeks ago. The recording I had transferred to a small portable speaker that morning. Insurance, in case I needed it. I returned to the living room and sat down in the armchair across from them. I placed the folder on the coffee table but didn't open it yet. Jessica's eyes fixed on it like a hawk watching prey. Before we get to the details, I said carefully, I want to tell you both something. Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman. She taught elementary school for 40 years. She believed in education, hard work, and above all, character. She used to tell me that money was like water. It could nourish good soil or wash away weak foundations. Derek nodded seriously, as if this wisdom meant something to him. Jessica squeezed his hand, her face arranged in an expression of thoughtful respect. I opened the folder and pulled out the estate summary. The total value of your grandmother's estate, after all debts and expenses, is $3,700,000. Jessica gasped. Actually gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth and her eyes went wide. Derek's jaw dropped slightly before he caught himself and tried to look composed. That's incredible, Jessica breathed. Grandma was always so frugal. I had no idea. She was smart with money, I said. Very smart, and very careful about who she trusted with it. I slid the estate summary across the table. They both leaned forward to look at it, their eyes scanning the numbers. I watched Jessica's finger trace down to the distribution section. Originally, I said, emphasizing the word, the estate was to be split roughly in half. Your grandmother wanted to provide for both of us. Jessica looked up, her face glowing with barely contained excitement. Originally? Yes. Originally, you were set to receive $1,900,000. The number hung in the air. Derek actually stood up in his excitement, then seemed to realize how inappropriate that was and quickly sat back down. Jessica's hands were shaking. I could see her mentally calculating what that money meant. The new house, the vacations, the lifestyle she wanted, were set to receive. She said slowly, her smile faltering slightly. What does that mean? I sat back in my chair, looking at her directly. 3 weeks ago, on a Thursday afternoon, I drove to your house to surprise you with this news. I was so excited. I couldn't wait to see your face. Jessica's expression began to change, confusion creeping in around the edges. I knocked on your door, I continued, my voice steady and calm. No one answered, but I heard voices upstairs. The door was unlocked, so I came inside. I called out, but you didn't hear me. So I walked upstairs to your bedroom. The color was draining from Jessica's face. The door was partially open. I said. I stood outside, about to knock, when I heard Derek say something. He said, Your dad is absolutely pathetic, Jess. When is he going to realize we're only tolerating him out of obligation? Derek's face went white. Jessica made a small sound, almost like a whimper. Then I heard you laugh, I said, looking directly at my daughter. And you said, Oh my God, I know. I can't wait until he's just gone, you know. Then we won't have to deal with his embarrassing self anymore. Dad, Jessica started, but I held up my hand. I stood there for 10 minutes. I said quietly, I heard everything. Every word about my clothes, my education, my house, my phone. I heard you mock my wedding toast, the one about your mother. I heard you discuss putting me in the cheapest nursing home you could find, County Home on 5th Street, where you wouldn't have to visit. Tears were streaming down Jessica's face now. Daddy, please, I heard Derek ask what I could possibly provide for you, and you said, he has nothing we need, nothing we want. He's just there, taking up space in our lives. I reached for my phone and the small speaker. I recorded it. Would you like to hear it? No, Jessica sobbed. No, please. I'm sorry, But I pressed play anyway. Their voices filled my living room, cruel and mocking, laughing at my expense. Derek's voice. Your dad is absolutely pathetic. Jessica's laughter. Her words about wishing I was gone. I let it play for 2 minutes before turning it off. The silence that followed felt absolute. Jessica had collapsed forward, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs. Derek sat frozen, his face a mask of horror. Neither of them tried to deny it. What could they possibly say? I want you to understand something, I said, my voice thick with emotion but still controlled. I spent 29 years raising you alone after your mother died. I gave you everything I had. Every dollar, every moment, every piece of my heart. I wore the same clothes for years so you could have new ones. I ate peanut butter sandwiches so you could have hot meals. I took out loans I'm still paying off so you could go to college. I know, Jessica whispered. I know. I'm sorry. I gave you a wedding that cost me every penny I had saved because I wanted you to be happy. I told myself you were busy when you canceled our dinners, that you were building your life when you stopped calling. I made excuses for you because I loved you so much I couldn't see what you had become. I stood up and walked to the window, my back to them, looking out at the garden Caroline had planted decades ago. When I called about my health concerns, you asked if it could wait a month. When I needed a ride to the doctor, you showed up late and spent the entire time on your phone. You didn't ask how I was. You didn't care. Until I mentioned the inheritance, I turned back to face them. Then suddenly you loved me again. Suddenly I was daddy and you missed spending time with me. Suddenly you sent me long text messages about how much you appreciated my sacrifices. Jessica was openly weeping now, her makeup running down her face. I don't know what happened to me, she said between sobs. I don't know when I became this person. Please, Dad, please forgive me. It'll change. I promise it'll change. You had chances to change, I said quietly. Every canceled dinner was a chance. Every ignored phone call. Every moment you could have shown me that I still mattered to you. But you didn't take those chances because you didn't think there were any consequences. I walked back to the coffee table and picked up the folder. Here's what I've decided. Derek found his voice, finally, standing up with his hands clenched. You can't punish her forever for one conversation. That inheritance is legally hers. Your mother left it to her. I looked at him with something close to pity. Sit down, Derek. Something in my tone made him obey immediately. I pulled out another document from the folder. My mother included a clause in her will, Section 7, Paragraph 3. She was a careful woman, and she worried about leaving a large sum of money to someone who might not be ready to handle it with wisdom and character. As the executor of the estate, I have full discretionary authority to modify the distribution if circumstances warrant. I laid the document on the table where they could see it, my finger pointing to the highlighted section. She trusted my judgment. I continued. She trusted that if I saw evidence that Jessica wasn't prepared to receive this inheritance with grace and responsibility, I would make the right decision. Jessica lifted her tear-stained face. What are you saying? I sat back down, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. I'm saying that I've made decisions about how this estate will be distributed. Decisions that I believe honor your grandmother's wishes and values. I pulled out the modified distribution plan, the one Margaret and I had worked on for days. Your grandmother's entire estate, all $3,700,000, will be allocated as follows. Jessica's breath came in short gasps as she waited. $1 million will establish a scholarship fund in your mother's name, the Caroline Mitchell Memorial Scholarship for underprivileged students pursuing higher education. Your mother believed everyone deserved a chance at education, regardless of their economic background. This fund will help dozens of students over the coming years. Jessica closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. $500,000 will go to the United Auto Workers Hardship Fund, helping families who face financial crises due to medical emergencies, job loss, or other catastrophes. People like us, Jessica. Working people who need support when life gets hard. Derek was shaking his head slowly, unable to process what he was hearing. $200,000 will be donated to Riverside Memorial Hospital's cancer treatment program in memory of your mother, who received such compassionate care there during her final months. Maybe it will help other families facing what we faced. Dad, Jessica whispered, but I wasn't finished. And $2 million will be placed in trust. Her head snapped up. What? A trust, managed by attorney Margaret Sullivan, over the next 5 years, if you demonstrate genuine change, genuine character, and genuine love without any expectation of financial reward. Portions of that trust may be distributed to you. Margaret will evaluate your actions annually, looking for evidence that you've rediscovered the values your mother and I tried to teach you. I leaned forward, looking directly into my daughter's eyes. You'll need to prove that you care about people, not their money, that you value integrity over status, that you remember where you came from and who sacrificed everything to get you where you are. If you can do that, truly do that, then maybe you'll receive some of what your grandmother wanted you to have. And if I can't, Jessica asked, her voice barely audible, then the money will go to charity. Every penny. It will do good in the world, even if it couldn't do good for you. The room fell silent except for the sound of Jessica's quiet crying. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, to fight, but he seemed to understand that nothing he said would matter now. I pulled out one final document. However, Jessica looked up, hope flickering in her devastated expression. I'm giving you $100,000 immediately. No strings attached. No conditions. No oversight. Her mouth opened in shock. What? $100,000, I repeated. It's enough to prove that I still love you, despite everything. Enough to show that your father and I haven't completely given up on you. But it's not enough to replace the work you need to do on yourself. It's not enough to let you avoid facing who you've become. I slid the check across the table. Jessica stared at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together. That's what you need to figure out. Derek finally spoke, his voice hollow. This is insane. You're destroying your own daughter over one bad conversation. I looked at him with cold clarity. I'm not destroying her. I'm giving her the only chance she has to save herself. Money didn't make her cruel, Derek, but it revealed what was already there. And now she has to decide whether she wants to be someone her mother would recognize or someone her grandmother would be ashamed of. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think you should both leave now. They stood slowly, mechanically. Jessica clutched the check in one hand, and I noticed her wedding ring glinting in the lamplight. For just a moment, I remembered putting that ring on her mother's finger, making promises about forever and family and love. At the door, Jessica turned back to me, her face destroyed. Is there any way to fix this? Any way to make you forgive me? Forgiveness isn't the issue, I said quietly. Understanding is. You need to understand what you did, who you hurt, and why it matters. You need to understand what real love looks like, what real sacrifice means. Your grandmother's trust gives you 5 years to figure that out. Whether you do or not is entirely up to you. She nodded, unable to speak anymore, and walked out into the night. Derek followed without a word, his face tight with barely controlled anger. I watched their taillights disappear down the street, then closed the door. I walked back to the living room and looked at the dinner table still set with my mother's china. The pot roast barely touched, the wine unopened. I had just given away most of my inheritance. I had just broken my daughter's heart, maybe permanently. But as I stood there in the house where I had raised her, surrounded by memories of better times, I knew I had done the right thing. Love without accountability wasn't love. It was enabling. And Jessica needed to learn that actions had consequences, that people's feelings mattered, that you couldn't take and take and take without ever giving back. Whether she would learn those lessons or not, I couldn't control. But I had given her the chance. The rest was up to her. I spent an hour cleaning up dinner, wrapping the leftovers, washing my mother's china by hand and putting it carefully away. Then I sat in my armchair with a cup of tea and looked at the photographs on the wall. Caroline smiled at me from our wedding day, young and beautiful and full of hope. Jessica at 5 years old, missing her front teeth, laughing at something I had said. The three of us at the Grand Canyon. The last happy memory before everything changed. I hope I did right, I whispered to Caroline's photograph. I hope you'd be proud. The house settled around me in its familiar creaks and sighs. Tomorrow, I would call Margaret and make sure all the paperwork was filed correctly. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of establishing Caroline's scholarship fund. Tomorrow, I would figure out how to live with the choice I had made. But tonight, I just sat with my memories and my grief, mourning the daughter I used to have and hoping, somewhere deep inside, that she might find her way back to the person she was always meant to be. The weeks that followed were strange and lonely. I went to work at the shop, fixed cars, came home to an empty house. No Sunday dinners to prepare for. No phone calls from Jessica. Nothing but silence. Margaret called regularly to update me on the trust establishment and the charity distributions. The Caroline Mitchell Memorial Scholarship Fund was officially established, and applications were already coming in from deserving students. The Auto Workers Hardship Fund had received their donation and sent a letter thanking my mother's estate for the life-changing contribution. The hospital called to discuss naming opportunities for their cancer treatment wing. Good was being done with the money. That brought me some comfort during the sleepless nights. 6 weeks after that terrible Sunday dinner, Margaret called with different news. Ben, I thought you should know. Jessica and Derek are getting divorced. I sat down heavily. What happened? According to courthouse records, Jessica filed 3 weeks ago. Derek apparently became difficult after the inheritance situation. He blamed her for losing the money, said some terrible things. The marriage fell apart quickly. I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that Jessica was away from someone who only valued her for what she could provide. Sadness that her marriage had failed. Guilt that my decision had contributed to it. There's more, Margaret continued gently. Jessica lost her job 2 weeks ago. Performance issues, from what I understand, and she's moved out of their house into an apartment on the south side. The address suggests it's quite modest. My first instinct was to call her, to help, to fix things. But I stopped myself. This wasn't punishment. This was consequence. Jessica needed to face the life she had built and decide what kind of person she wanted to be when everything fell apart. Still, I worried. Every day, I worried. 2 months after our dinner, on a rainy Tuesday evening in October, I heard a knock on my door. I opened it to find Jessica standing there, soaked through, her hair plastered to her head, mascara running down her face. She wore jeans and a sweatshirt, no designer labels in sight. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside, and she entered. I got her a towel, made her tea, sat her down at the kitchen table. The same table where I used to help her with homework, where we used to eat breakfast together before school, where I had planned out her surprise inheritance reveal. She wrapped her hands around the mug, staring into it for a long moment before speaking. "I'm not here about the money," she said finally. "I need you to know that first. I'm not here to beg or to convince you to change your mind about the trust." "Okay," I said simply, sitting across from her. "I'm here because everything fell apart, and I realized I have nothing. Derek left me. My job fired me. I lost the house. I'm living in a 600-square-foot apartment with secondhand furniture, and I can barely afford groceries." She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "And you know what the worst part is?" I waited. "The worst part is that I deserved all of it, every single bit of it, because I became exactly what you heard that day. I became someone who valued things over people, status over character, money over love. I became cruel and selfish, and everything my mother wouldn't have wanted me to be." Tears rolled down her face, but she didn't try to stop them. "I spent the last 2 months thinking about that day you overheard us, thinking about every word I said, And I realized those weren't just things I said in a moment. They were things I believed. I actually believed my own father was pathetic and embarrassing, the man who gave up everything for me. She set down the tea and looked at me directly. I don't know how to fix this, Dad. I don't know if I can. But I want to try. Not for the money and the trust. Not to get anything from you. I just want to know my father again. The real you. The man I forgot to appreciate. I felt something crack open in my chest. Some small piece of the wall I had built around my heart. And I want you to know the real me. She continued, her voice breaking. Whoever that is now. Because I don't actually know anymore. I became this person I don't recognize. And now I have to figure out who I really am underneath all the pretension and greed. We sat in silence for a while. Rain drummed against the windows. The kitchen clock ticked steadily. Finally, I spoke. The $100,000 I gave you. What did you do with it? Jessica wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I paid off my student loans. All of them. $37,000. The ones you took out for me that you're still paying on. I called the bank and transferred the payments to my name. You don't owe anything anymore. I stared at her, shocked. Then I paid for 6 months of rent in advance so I'd have stability while I figure out my life. That was $9,000. I put $20,000 in savings for emergencies. And the rest? She paused. The rest I donated to Mom's scholarship fund. In your name, as a thank you for every sacrifice you made that I never appreciated. My vision blurred with tears. I know it doesn't fix anything, Jessica said quickly. I know it doesn't make up for what I said or who I was. But I wanted you to know that. I'm trying. I got a job at a small marketing firm, entry level, making $43,000 a year. It's 70% less than I was making before, but the people there are kind, and the work feels honest. She reached across the table hesitantly, stopping short of touching my hand. I started seeing a therapist, twice a week, trying to understand how I got so lost. And I joined a group for people going through divorce and major life changes. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because I need you to know I'm not coming back to get something from you. I'm coming back because I finally understand what I lost. And it wasn't the inheritance, Dad. It was you. I lost you. And that's worth more than any amount of money. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The expensive clothes were gone. The perfect hair and makeup were gone. The entitled attitude was gone. What remained looked like a person who had been broken down and was slowly, painfully, trying to build herself back up into someone better. I can't promise I've changed completely, Jessica said. I can't promise I won't mess up again. But I promise I'm trying. And if you'll let me, I'd like to start over. I'd like to come to Sunday dinners again. Not because I'm supposed to, but because I want to know you. I want to hear about Mrs. Patterson's hip surgery and how your tomatoes are growing. I want to learn to make Mom's pot roast. I want to remember what it feels like to be your daughter. The kitchen fell quiet again. Outside, the rain began to slow. I thought about Caroline, about what she would want me to do. I thought about my mother, about the trust she had placed in my judgment. I thought about forgiveness and second chances, and whether love could survive this much damage. Sunday dinners start at 6, I said finally. If you're going to come, be on time. And come ready to actually talk, not to perform. Jessica's face crumpled with relief. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. I'm not promising anything, I warned. I'm not promising I can forget what happened or that we'll ever be what we were. But I'm willing to see if we can build something new. Something honest. She nodded, wiping her face with the towel. That's more than I deserve. Probably, I agreed, and she laughed despite her tears. A real laugh, not the cruel mockery I had heard through her bedroom door. She stood to leave, and I walked her to the door. On the threshold, she turned back. Dad, one more thing. What? I found a photo the other day. You, holding me on my first day of kindergarten. I was wearing that yellow dress with the sunflowers, and I was crying because I was scared. You were holding me so tight, and you had this look on your face like you'd protect me from anything in the world. I remembered that day. Remembered her little arms around my neck, her tears on my shoulder. I want to be worthy of that look again, Jessica said softly. I want to be the person that little girl believed her father was raising, the person Mom would be proud of. Then be that person, I said. Not for me, not for the trust, for yourself. She nodded and walked out into the rain, which had softened to a gentle mist. I watched her drive away in a Honda Civic, 10 years old. Nothing like the BMW she used to drive, but somehow it suited her better now. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhausted but feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the possibility of hope, maybe the beginning of healing. The road ahead would be long. Trust, once broken, didn't rebuild itself overnight, but Jessica had taken the first real step, acknowledging what she had done, accepting the consequences, and choosing to change not for reward but because it was right. Whether she would follow through remained to be seen. But for the first time since that terrible day outside her bedroom door, I thought maybe, just maybe, I might get my daughter back after all. The months that followed brought slow, steady change. Jessica came to Sunday dinners every single week. The first few were awkward, filled with long silences and careful conversations. But gradually, something shifted. We started talking about real things. Her therapy sessions, her struggles with divorce, her new job, my memories of Caroline. She asked questions she had never asked before. What was I like as a young man? How did I meet her mother? What were my dreams before she was born? I told her stories, and she listened with genuine interest, not checking her phone, not counting the minutes until she could leave. By the 4th month, Jessica started helping me with projects around the house. We repainted the kitchen together, her choice of a soft yellow that reminded her of Caroline's favorite flowers. We planted tomatoes in the garden, her hands in the dirt beside mine, laughing when we couldn't remember if the seedlings needed to be 8 or 10 inches apart. One Sunday, she brought ingredients and asked if I would teach her to make Caroline's pot roast. We stood side by side in the kitchen, me guiding her through each step, watching her concentrate with her tongue between her teeth just like she used to do with homework. When she served it, and it tasted almost like her mother's, we both cried. Margaret Sullivan called me after 4 months with an update. I've been observing Jessica as required by the trust. I've seen her at the scholarship fund office, volunteering on Saturdays. I've reviewed her financial records with her permission. She's living modestly, saving money, making responsible choices. I've also spoken with her therapist, who says she's doing genuine work on herself. And, I asked, and am impressed, Ben. This isn't performance. This is real change. She's not asking about the trust, not even mentioning it. She's just becoming a better person. By month 6, Derek's name stopped coming up in conversation. Jessica had processed the divorce, recognized her part in the marriage's failure, and was learning to be alone without being lonely. She made new friends at her job, people who valued kindness over status. She told me about dinners with coworkers at casual restaurants, game nights, simple pleasures she had forgotten existed. One evening, she showed up at my door with a framed photograph. It was the one she had mentioned. Me holding her on her first day of kindergarten, her little face pressed against my shoulder, my arms wrapped protectively around her. I want you to have this, she said. To remember that the person in this photo, the father who would do anything for his daughter, he's still here. And the little girl who trusted him completely, she's still here too. We just both forgot for a while. I hung it in the living room, next to the other family photos. It fit perfectly. As we approached the 1-year mark since that terrible dinner, Margaret called to schedule our annual trust evaluation. She came to my house on a Saturday afternoon, documents in hand, and sat with Jessica and me at the kitchen table. Jessica, Margaret began formally. As trustee of your grandmother's estate, am required to evaluate whether you've demonstrated the character and values necessary to begin receiving distributions from the trust. I've spent this year observing your choices, your actions, and your growth. Jessica sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked nervous but not desperate, not like someone whose future depended on this moment. I've seen you volunteer at the scholarship fund every Saturday for 8 months. Margaret continued. I've seen your financial records showing modest living and responsible choices. I've spoken with your employer, who says you're an excellent employee with strong values. I've spoken with your therapist, who confirms you're doing meaningful work on yourself. Margaret looked at me, and I've watched your relationship with your father heal. Not quickly, not easily, but genuinely. She pulled out a document. Based on all of this, I'm authorizing the release of $250,000 from the trust to be paid over the next year in monthly installments. This is not the full amount, and it comes with the understanding that you'll continue demonstrating the values that earned it. Jessica's eyes went wide. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Margaret said kindly. You earned it through your actions. That's how trust works. After Margaret left, Jessica and I sat in the garden. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine, ready for picking. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that Caroline always loved. I don't need the money, Jessica said quietly. I mean, it's wonderful, and I'm grateful, but that's not why I've been doing this. I know, I said. I've been doing it because I like who I'm becoming. I like having real conversations with you. I like knowing that I'm making Mom proud, wherever she is. I like looking in the mirror and recognizing the person looking back. She picked a tomato, examining it in the fading light. You saved my life, Dad. Not with the trust or the test or any of that. You saved my life by refusing to let me stay the person I had become. You loved me enough to let me fall. And that's the hardest kind of love there is. I put my arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into me the way she used to when she was young. Your mother used to say that the hardest part of parenting is knowing when to hold on and when to let go. I just hope I got the timing right. You did, Jessica said. You really did. We sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon, not needing to say anything more. The road had been painful, the lesson brutal, but we had both survived it. More than survived. We had been transformed. Jessica was no longer the entitled, cruel person I had overheard that day. She was becoming someone with depth, compassion, and genuine character. Someone Caroline would be proud of. Someone I was proud of. And I had learned something too. That love without boundaries isn't love. It's enabling. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is hold firm to your values, even when it breaks your heart. That inheritance isn't about money. It's about passing on what truly matters. The financial inheritance my mother left would do good in the world through scholarships and charitable work. But the real inheritance, the one that mattered most, was the lessons about character, integrity, and what it means to truly love someone. That inheritance, once nearly lost, had been reclaimed, and it would last far longer than any amount of money ever could. As we walked back into the house together, Jessica stopped at the photograph of her first day of kindergarten. She touched the frame gently, smiling at the scared little girl and the protective father. Thank you, she whispered. Whether to me or to her younger self or to Caroline, I wasn't sure. Maybe to all of us. You're welcome, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. 2 years have passed now since that terrible day when I overheard the conversation that shattered my heart. Today, Jessica is a different person. She's the assistant director at a nonprofit that helps low-income families access educational resources. She lives simply, values deeply, and shows up consistently. She's dating someone new, a teacher who shares her commitment to making a difference rather than making money. Last month, Margaret authorized the release of another $300,000 from the trust. Jessica used half of it to buy a small house, modest and sensible. The other half she donated to expand her mother's scholarship fund, doubling the number of students it can help each year. We have Sunday dinner every week without fail. Sometimes we cook together. Sometimes we order pizza and watch old movies. Sometimes we just sit in the garden and talk about everything and nothing. The relationship we have now is deeper, more honest, more real than what we had before. built not on obligation or guilt, but on genuine love and mutual respect. I'm 70 years old now, still working part-time at the shop because I enjoy it, not because I need to. I'm healthy, relatively happy, and blessed to have my daughter back in my life in a way that matters. The greatest inheritance we leave isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in character and values, in the strength to make hard choices out of love. I almost lost my daughter to greed and vanity, but by holding firm to what mattered, I gave her the chance to find herself again. Money can be spent in a day, but integrity, once reclaimed, lasts forever. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their child face the consequences of who they've become, so they have the opportunity to choose who they want to be. Today, I'm not wealthy by society's standards, living in my same small house, driving my same old truck, but am rich in the only currency that matters. I have my daughter back, and she's becoming someone her mother would be incredibly proud of. That's worth more than any inheritance in the world. That's worth everything. So let me ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. If someone you loved showed you through their actions that you didn't matter to them, that you were just an obligation or an embarrassment, would you have the strength to step back and let them face the consequences? Would you be able to love them enough to risk losing them completely in hopes they might find themselves? It's the hardest question a parent, a spouse, a friend can face. And there's no easy answer. But I believe this. Real love isn't about giving people everything they want. It's about helping them become everything they can be, even when that process is painful for everyone involved. Values matter, character matters, and sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to rebuild themselves from the ground up. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own relationships differently, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a hard choice out of love? How did it turn out? Your story might help someone else who's facing a similar situation. And if you found value in this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Sharing this with someone who might need to hear it could make a real difference in their life. We all need reminders sometimes about what truly matters. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brought you some comfort, some wisdom, or at least some food for thought. Remember, the best inheritance you can leave or receive isn't money. It's the strength of character to do what's right even when it costs you everything. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. That's what really matters in the end.